Jake had no inkling that his life was teetering on the edge of devastation that evening. He had been invited to a surprise party to honor a friend's promotion. Emma, his wife, had gone ahead to assist with the preparations. Her fondness for orchestrating grand surprises was well known, so Jake thought little of it when she suggested he arrive later to make a memorable entrance. Trusting her completely, he expected the evening to unfold without a hitch. However, as soon as he stepped inside the house, an inexplicable tension crept over him. The usual festive atmosphere felt strangely muted. Though the room buzzed with lively conversation, laughter, and upbeat music, something felt off. Guests, dressed impeccably, mingled effortlessly, and appeared to enjoy themselves. Yet Emma was conspicuously absent. At first, Jake assumed she was caught up in party duties, but unease began to coil in his chest. She wasn't at the bar preparing drinks as he had imagined, nor was she chatting with friends in the crowd. Her absence gnawed at him, filling his thoughts with questions he couldn't quite articulate. The guests seemed oblivious to anything amiss. Yet Jake felt the oppressive weight of something unspoken in the air. As he scanned the room, a woman he didn't recognize approached him. Her expression was taut, as if she were carrying a burden too heavy to share. She hesitated before speaking, her voice barely audible over the music. "You should check the guest room upstairs," she murmured. Those words struck him like a thunderclap, icy dread flooding his veins. Though her cryptic suggestion made little sense, a primal instinct urged him to follow it. His heart pounded erratically as he ascended the stairs, every step feeling heavier than the last. Reaching the door, Jake hesitated. He inhaled deeply, trying to brace himself for whatever awaited him. His hand trembled as he pushed the door open, entirely unprepared for the sight that would forever alter his life. Inside, time seemed to grind to a halt. Emma, the woman he had trusted and cherished, was entangled in an intimate embrace with another man. Panic and guilt painted their faces as they sprang apart, but it was too late. The image had burned itself into Jake's mind, searing with cruel clarity. For a long moment, silence engulfed the room. Jake stood frozen, his mind unable to comprehend the betrayal unfolding before his eyes. He didn't yell, didn't confront them. Instead, he turned and walked out, his movements robotic as though his body had detached from his shattered emotions. Outside, the crisp night air bit into his skin, but it couldn't clear the chaos in his mind. The scene replayed incessantly, each detail cutting deeper into his soul. The promises Emma had made to him now felt like hollow lies, and the life they had built seemed to crumble before him. Confusion, anguish, and an overwhelming sense of betrayal swirled in his thoughts. He stumbled through the rest of the evening in a daze, disconnected from everything and everyone around him. When Emma finally came home that night, the weight of what Jake had witnessed hung between them, unspoken yet suffocating. Jake wasn't ready to hear her excuses. He had no desire to confront her, no urge to argue or even engage. All he could manage was silence, letting the gravity of what had happened crush him like an unrelenting weight. The next morning, Emma insisted they needed to talk. She wanted to explain, to plead her case. Though anger and sorrow still churned inside him, Jake begrudgingly agreed. They sat across from each other at the kitchen table, a space once brimming with joy, shared meals, and laughter. Now it felt cold, foreign, and filled with an unbearable tension. Emma's hands trembled as she folded them on the table, her eyes glistening with a mixture of fear and regret. Jake, however, sat stiffly, his gaze as hard as stone. His expression revealed nothing, yet the raw pain beneath the surface was unmistakable. The intensity of his silence seemed to suffocate her. "I don't even know where to begin," Emma said, her voice trembling. "But I need to try. There's so much I need to explain. Please, just hear me out." Jake said nothing, reaching for his coffee with an unsettling calm. He sipped it slowly before setting the cup down with a sharp thud. His eyes locked onto hers, piercing and unyielding. "Talk," he said, his voice low but edged with frost. "But know this. Nothing you say will undo what's already been done." Emma's voice wavered as she began, struggling to find the words. It was a mistake, a terrible, impulsive moment of weakness. I don't want to lose you, Jake. I love you. I've always loved you. A bitter laugh escaped him, his expression twisting with sarcasm. Love? He repeated, his tone cutting. You call this love? Sneaking around behind my back, betraying me with another man? If that's your version of love, I want no part of it. Tears spilled down Emma's cheeks as she choked on her words. You're right. What I did was unforgivable, but I felt like there was a growing distance between us. I thought you didn't see me anymore. I was scared, confused. I made a terrible choice, and I hate myself for it. Jake stared at her, his mind a storm of emotions. Pain and betrayal surged through him like a wildfire, but deep down, a small part of him searched for a glimmer of the woman he had once loved so deeply. Yet all he could see in her tear-filled eyes was a wreckage of their shattered trust. He finally spoke, his voice raw and heavy. Our marriage was built on trust, Emma. Without it, what do we have? Nothing. How can we rebuild something on ruins? Emma sat frozen, her tears falling freely as she absorbed his words. Every syllable felt like a knife to her heart. She clenched her trembling hands tightly, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake, I know I broke us. I know there's no undoing this, but I believe we can fix it. Please, give me another chance. We can save this if we try. Jake suddenly stood, his body rigid as he fought to contain the storm inside him. He turned away, pacing a few steps before facing her again. His eyes blazed with a mix of fury and despair. What hurts the most, he began, his voice quaking, isn't just what you did. It's that you lied to me. You looked me in the eye, knowing you were tearing us apart. How could you do that? Emma could only weep, her guilt weighing down every breath. She wanted to say something, anything, to bridge the chasm between them, but no words felt sufficient. Jake stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable, before turning and walking away, leaving Emma alone with her remorse and the shattered remnants of their life together. Jake leaned over the table, his voice dropping to a near whisper, his words heavy with emotion. I don't even know how I feel about you anymore. Love, anger, disappointment? I don't know. The only thing I do know is that I can't trust you. And without trust, there's nothing left. Emma's face crumpled under the weight of his words. She could feel him slipping further away, and the realization hit her like a tidal wave. She had destroyed the most precious thing in her life. Jake exhaled heavily, his emotions threatening to overwhelm him. He couldn't continue the conversation, not now. Turning to leave, he paused at the doorway and glanced back at her. Give me time, he said, his voice firm but tired. But don't expect a miracle. The door closed softly behind him, leaving Emma alone in the suffocating silence. Jake retreated to the living room and collapsed onto the couch. The stillness of the house was unbearable, pressing down on him like a tangible force. On the table before him sat his half-empty coffee, now cold. It was a stark reminder of how far they had fallen from the life they once shared. Everything felt fractured, like a beautiful picture shattered into irreparable fragments. Her tears and desperate pleas echoed in his mind, but they couldn't erase the pain her betrayal had etched into his soul. The wound she had created was deep, a scar he feared might never heal. Jake's thoughts raced endlessly, looping through a maze of questions that all led back to the same agonizing truth. Where had it all unraveled? How had they reached this breaking point? No matter how many times he searched for answers, they always circled back to one undeniable fact. It was Emma's choice that night, a decision that had forever changed their lives. Accepting this new reality was a struggle. The love he once felt for her, one so certain and unwavering, now seemed like a distant memory buried under layers of hurt. In the days that followed, Jake drifted through life in a fog of numbness. The pain lingered like a shadow, always present, refusing to let him forget. But amidst the sorrow, Jake realized he couldn't stay stuck in his emotional limbo forever. Something had to give. He faced a choice. Bury the pain and attempt to move forward with what remained of his life, or carve out a new path for himself, one no longer defined by Emma's betrayal. One morning, weeks after the turmoil had begun, Jake found himself standing before the bathroom mirror. The reflection staring back at him was unfamiliar. A man hollowed out by heartbreak. His eyes, once full of life, now seemed lifeless and weary, weighed down by sleepless nights and the emotional toll of it all. "This isn't me," he whispered to the empty room, his voice a quiet declaration of resolve. "I can't keep doing this. I won't let this destroy me." In that moment, something shifted within him. For the first time in weeks, he saw a glimmer of possibility. The chance to reclaim his life, to rebuild himself from the rubble. He knew what he needed to do. Later that day, Jake and Emma sat at the same kitchen table where so many of their memories had been made. Once a place of shared meals and whispered dreams, it now felt barren, as if all the warmth had drained away. The air between them was thick with unspoken words. Emma looked at him with tearful, pleading eyes, but Jake's gaze was steady, his decision firm. He had spent countless hours thinking about this moment, about what to say, and now it was time to face the truth. "Emma," he began, his voice steady yet heavy with emotion, "I've been trying to make sense of everything. I've thought about us, about what we had and what's left, and I realize I can't do this anymore. Without trust, there's no foundation. And without a foundation, we have nothing." Her eyes filled with fresh tears, her lips quivering as she tried to find the words to protest. But as Jake's words sank in, the fight in her faded. She lowered her head, her voice breaking as she whispered, "I understand. I know I've lost you. I know I can't undo what I've done." A pang of guilt twisted in Jake's chest at the sight of her heartbreak. Despite everything, he still felt a lingering love for her. But it wasn't enough. That love, once unbreakable, was now too fractured to hold them together. "I wish things were different," he said softly, almost apologetically. "I wish we could have been enough. But this isn't something we can fix. I truly hope you find happiness someday." And just like that, it ended. Their divorce was swift, conducted without the hostility that so often accompanied such situations. Emma moved out of the house, leaving Jake behind in what had once been their shared home. But the walls, once filled with laughter and love, now felt oppressive, a constant reminder of what had been lost. Months passed, and Jake began to rebuild his life piece by piece. He surrounded himself with friends, found moments of joy, and slowly re-entered the world he had once known. Yet the nights were always the hardest. In the stillness, memories of Emma crept in. Her smile, her betrayal, the love they had shared. The pain lingered, a silent companion he couldn't quite escape. Even so, Jake knew he had made the right decision. Choosing himself had been the hardest yet most necessary choice. One crisp morning, while walking alone, Jake paused to take in the quiet beauty of the world around him. For the first time in a long while, he felt a faint sense of peace. "Life goes on," he murmured to himself, his voice carrying a quiet determination. And so it did. It wasn't the ending he had envisioned, but perhaps it was the beginning of something better, something that could lead him, someday, to healing and peace.